scared my daughter for dirt roads for a long time after that because the roads were so bad. And she said she thought we were about to roll over the Wagoneer going down in one spot.
That's why they call it rough edge. It's been called that a long time too.
Yeah.
Other such instruments to work the public road.
Wow.
Leading from one place to another. And people had to go out and work the roads. So if you didn't pay the tax, you had to go work. And if you were able to pay the tax, then they would send prisoners out. And that's why these roads are so deep. It's so many years of washing and then working the roads deeper and deeper with shovels. And then they had mules and pans. They would pull a pan along behind a mule. That's how these roads got to be so washed out and deep.
Jan, while we're driving down these big cuts through the land here with these high banks, you want to tell me your story of near death up here?
Yeah. One time I left work and the notion just went through my mind to come through here on the way home. And this was in the days of early cell phone technology in this area. And the only cell phone I had was a bag phone plugged into the cigarette lighter of my truck. And I was in a little Ford Ranger. And I came through this area and it was just as sunny and pretty as it is today. And about the time I got halfway back in here, there was one dark little cloud that appeared right over me. And the bottom fell out. I mean, instantly. It was just as if a flood came. I mean, it poured in torrents for 10 minutes. I had to pull over. All I could do was sit there. Well, there was a logging company back in here logging some of this area, and I had passed by where they were working, and when I got past their logging camp, they had just scraped the road coming down in here to one of these branches. It may be this one up here. So I was headed down one of these steep hills in that fine red powder where they had just scraped the road. Well, that flood came. I stopped because the powder was just kicking to the wheels on my truck and I was starting to slide sideways. And I sat there in that flood thinking, what am I going to do? And as I sat there, I could feel my truck sliding sideways. I was headed straight down toward a little wooden bridge over a deep ravine of a creek. And as I slid sideways, I thought, oh, what am I going to do? I was sliding sideways and forward. And I thought, what am I going to do? I said, dear Lord, help me out of this. And about that time, I heard something. It was a buzzing sound. And I couldn't figure out what in the world it was. I thought it was something on my truck. And the rain suddenly stopped. And I was able to get out of the truck into the mud that was just absolutely ankle deep. And I looked up behind me, and at the top of the hill, about halfway down, was a logging truck that had turned over on its side. He had started down that hill and got caught in the mud, in the flood rain also. And when he saw me sitting down there, he put on brakes a little bit, and when he did, he slid sideways and turned over. And that logging truck had turned over on its side with a load of long logs. Well, it didn't hurt him. He got out and crawled up on top of the truck and was sitting there in the rain. And when the rain ended, his crew all came running to his assistance, and all of the equipment to pull his truck back up was on the other side of the creek. So he told me that as he was sitting there contemplating, should I just barrel on down this road and cross that bridge and hope for the best, he saw my truck. And as he was sitting there wondering what to do, his truck turned over. It just kind of slid over to one side into the ditch and tilted over, but it didn't fall all the way. It fell against an embankment, and of course my truck was between a 10-foot ditch and the creek, which was a complete gully drop off. And I say to this day that the good Lord kept that truck from plowing into me, because if he had come on down that hill and hit me, we would have all gone into the creek with me on the bottom. Me on the bottom of his truck and those logs. But I remember sitting there while it was raining trying to use that bag phone, and the phone did not work. There was no signal at all up in here. And I was just praying over what to do. And suddenly the rain stopped, and his workers came on by me walking, and they went over to the next hill, got their equipment. They came and hitched me to a skidder and pulled my truck out of there, and then they straightened his truck and pulled him out.
Wow.
And just thankful that wasn't any worse.
No, speaking of no cell phone reception out here, I know that once we go down that part of the road, even even in 2022, we don't have cell phone reception up here.
Yeah.
Now, this area here, if you don't mind, let's get out here. There's a store here, right?
If this is Ingram Crossroads, this is where there was a store and there was a house out there. But this also has changed a lot since I was here. Yeah, this is Ingram Crossroad. There was a store here ran by a lady named Madge Ingram back in the 1920s. And over here was her house. And out to the north side of her house was 2 rock graves. They built up out of rock.
Yeah.
But that's all been clear cut.
Yeah.
There's a chimney out there. Is that?
Yeah, there's a chimney right there. What do you know about our store? Because we were talking earlier up here about this being such a remote area. Was it just for the people that...
This was for the people who lived in this area. From here back, it's not quite as hilly as it is east and north.
Right.
That's terrible. That's why they call that rough edge. But from here back towards Waverly Hall and TALBOT, south and southeast of here, was all flat land, and there was a lot of farmers, big farms, a lot of tenant farms back in there. And this road here, I believe, goes back to Highway 36, and that was a main. That was what they call the old stagecoach road.
Right.
So there was a lot of activity on that road, a lot of travelers. But Ms. Ingram ran a store here. Her name was Madge Ingram, and the only reason I know about it is because Mr. Frank Lucas of TALBOT, when he was a young man, I'd say around the World War I time frame, he delivered kerosene and gas and oil up here to her.
Oh, wow.
And back then, it was not delivered by tanker truck. It was delivered in a truck that had cans that looked like milk cans on the back.
Wow.
And that's what the gasoline and kerosene was delivered in. And he used to speak of her.
So this was around in relative modern time, so to speak. Like, it survived past
Yes, of course, it was a very old store. I don't know whose it was before it was hers, but her house was right over here. I'm thinking that chimney up there is not where I'm thinking her house was, though. That may have been a tenant house there, because the chimneys that I'm thinking of were 2 big chimneys on each end of a house. And it was more or less right out in that area.
Gotcha.
I always wanted to come up here with a metal detector, but right here where they say the store was, that has always been saw briars.
Yeah.
You can't go out there.
No, and I was out here probably 2 years ago, and this was clear cut, so you could just walk right up to that chimney.
Yeah, and you didn't see any graves here then, did you?
I did not. But I believe, if I'm not mistaken, because I met a man, Mr. Colwell, who pointed me in the direction of some graves, and he told me there was a chimney with a couple graves out behind it.
Have you been to that tree up there?
Never made it to that tree.
Well, if I had to guess, I would say they didn't cut that tree down because there's graves under it.
Yeah.
But this area is just covered in sawbriars.
Yes, it is.
I don't see a way through there anywhere, do you?
That's why I didn't make it to that tree, is because of all the briars.
I don't think we'd make it today if we tried. We can try if you want to.
I've always thought that I would let it grow up a little bit more until they thin the pines out and then go have a look.
Maybe so.
I did walk up to that chimney up there, and I filmed it, like I said, a long time ago, or a couple years ago, and it was painful to walk up to that chimney. And I saw that stand of trees back there, because there are a few hardwood trees. Y'all can't see them at home because they're behind the pines, but it was so painful walking through here. Plus it was summer and it was snake season, and you know they love some briars that the rabbits are eating the blackberries on. But this is what we're talking about here. As soon as you step through here, it ain't nothing but just a briar patch. Something like maybe Brer Rabbit would live in.
That's one of the thickest briar patches I've ever seen.
Yeah. Up here's this is usually the worst section of it.
And I don't know how these roads got renamed Dixon Road. This was always Bonnie Hawkins Road. There used to be a bay tree down here that stuck out over the road. It had huge leaves. It looked just like a magnolia. The leaves were about that long, but they said it was a native bay tree.
So these big banks, man, these are just something right there. I think this is the area that I imagined you were in when you were telling me about the logging truck incident.
Yeah, we haven't gotten to the creek yet.
Yeah.
It was on the other side of the creek.
This is creek bottom through here, and there's the creek right coming up on it.
Yep, there used to be a little wooden bridge right here, except it was much lower. They built this up. They put a pipe under the road and filled all this in. And I can show you where my truck was broke down.
Yeah.
It wasn't broke down, it's where I got sideways in the road.
Right.
Happened to me right around this curve, along about right. See where that rock is right there?
Yeah.
That's where I was. I could see up the road behind me and see that logging truck turned over. I was on a little ways further. I was right here, and he turned over at the top of the hill sitting there.
Wow.
He slid off over that way to the right and turned over onto that embankment right there because he could see me sitting down there.
And that's the area back there that I was telling you about on text message the other night, where I stopped to take a picture. And down in that, you know, those banks are what, 15-foot tall banks, and these pine trees up there just towering way on up there, because I'm down in that hole. And I got out to take a picture, and the wind was blowing through and the pine trees were just whispering. It was the creepiest, loneliest feeling I have ever gotten up here. Which leads me to another thing I wanted to ask you. And this is something that I've always said to myself and never said it to anybody else. I've always said it to myself, though, that I thought this area was haunted. And I don't, you know, I'm a skeptic when it comes to that sort of thing. So I just said that to laugh about in my head. But you told me the other day that this area is reported to be actually haunted.
The people who lived up in here used to tell stories about strange things that happened. And, you know, some of them that lived up here said it was nonsense, and others said that it was true. But there was several houses up here that were rumored to be haunted. But the whole area, there's just something about the area of Rough Edge has always been a desolate, lonely place. And anywhere you go here, you always get the feeling that you're being watched.
Yes.
Like there's someone out here looking at you or keeping track of you, what you're doing. And it's just always been that way. And that's not just, it didn't just start with my feelings. I've heard that ever since I was a little kid from the older people. My daddy used to hunt up here. He was friends with the Hawkins family, and they allowed him to hunt on their property. He used to tell me that he felt like he was being watched the whole time he was here. And of course there was no one around for miles and miles. But it's just it's an old part of Talbot County that was settled long ago. And a lot of the people up here had no way out when there was you know, muddy roads, so they were kind of self-sustaining. They lived on what they could get by on up here.
And I've always thought that this area was just so magical. I don't know if maybe that's not the right word, but it's just when I come up here, and like when I was up here driving by myself, it just gets my mind wandering about all of the history that's happened here. And I think part of that is because it has not been modernized.
That's
you know,
right.
this is, those people lived here, they left, and the timber industry moved in, and that's it. Other than, you know, the hunting up here, there's not modern activity up here. There's not even power poles running through this, you know, area. So we're in just about as close as you can get to the middle of nowhere in rural Georgia in 2022. And what is all this in the road? This is how this road looks. I can get out of the car here and just show this on video.
It's better now than it has been in a long time.
Yeah, it is. And it's gonna be bad again, because once this starts washing away, this is gonna be about a 4-foot hole right here that's going to just separate these two parts of the road. So you have to have a better four-wheel drive than I've got to get through here.
No one travels these roads but deer hunters, loggers, and people like me and you.
That's it.
Robert and Dan, who get out and ramble around.
Right.
So the county doesn't really maintain it very often. It's scraped every once in a while.
Yeah, because for months it was impassable. They must have, they're logging up the road from where we're at right now, and it's also just after hunting season, so that's probably why they came through and fixed it. But for a long time, if you wanted to get down to that end of the road, you had to come in the other way. And we're actually in a deeper hole than I thought we were here. These tall banks, and you can see the trees just towering over there. It's a cool area though. I like it, even if it does give me the creeps. I can tell you, I wouldn't want to be here at night by myself.
Me either.
So anyway, back on the creepy subject of this area, I'm glad that you said that. And I'm glad you said that without me saying it first, because it makes me feel better about the way that I felt coming up here, because what you mentioned about the feeling that you're being watched, I felt that coming through here. And I'm not superstitious, and I just figure it's my mind playing tricks on me because it is such a desolate area. But this is it's got a feel to it for sure.
Back in the 1950s and 60s, everybody around here knew each other. You knew who owned the property, you knew the families, all the folks in the area had known one another for generations. And my daddy knew most of the people who owned property up in here, and people when they moved into town and left a house out in the country, they didn't have to worry about anyone messing with it. I mean, nobody went there and bothered. If they left furniture in the house, no one bothered it. Most of the time they didn't even lock the place, and they would lease it out to timber companies and so forth. And later, as the older generation passed away, the family would sell the home place to the timber company, and the houses were torn down because the timber company did not want houses. They didn't want to have to maintain anything, and they had no need for them, so they would tear them down. Most of the time they gave the lumber away to someone to go there and tear the house down. And I can remember my parents talking about houses out here that still had furniture in them. And
wow.
One in particular I remember was the old Jones place up on Highway 36, and it had always been rumored to be haunted. My grandmother even said when she was a little girl that was known as the haunted house. And my parents said that everyone they ever knew who lived there had said it was haunted. Well, I don't know, I couldn't tell you now what they based that on. But I do know that my daddy went up there one Sunday. They were out riding, and he stopped to show the house to my sister and her husband, and a couple of other family members were with them. And they went up. Of course, the house was unlocked, and they went in because he knew the family who owned it. They didn't care if he went in it. And they went in, and he wanted to show them the frescoes that were painted on the walls in the living room, which were hand painted. And that was one of the creepiest things I ever saw in my life, was the rooms in that house with those hand painted frescoes. They were just very strange. There is a picture of them in a book called Rockaway and Talbot, and I don't remember what volume book it's in, but there's pictures of those frescoes in that book. But anyway, when they went in the house, there was a walking cane propped by the back door, and they went in, went through the house looking, and when they went to leave, the walking cane was gone.
Oh no,
it was not there. And you know, there's miles and miles before there was any other house around there,
right?
And there was no vehicle anywhere. So he always wondered who had that walking cane, who left it there, or who took it with them.
Right. And I think I was mistaken about where I stopped and took a picture of the pine trees way up over my head. It was actually here in this tight little...
Yeah. You may want to get out and do that here instead of where you were, because this is creepy.
Yeah, it is.
I can imagine riding along here on a wagon at night.
Right.
Wondering what's going to jump on you.
Yeah, well, actually we will stop here and look at it. All right, so earlier I was talking about the creepy places here in Rough Edge, just in the landscape, and this was the place that I was talking about. I came right down here and I took a picture looking up this road just to photograph all the banks on the side of the road. And I was standing maybe right about down here with all these pine trees just towering way over my head, and the wind was blowing through them, and so all the pine trees were just whispering, and it was the, I don't even know if creepy is the right word, but the saddest, loneliest experience,
It is.
you know, to stand here. And as you were saying a minute ago when we stopped, about imagining coming down here through a wagon.
Yeah, if you can imagine, it started out, this is one of those roads that started out as an Indian trail,
Yeah.
and then it evolved into a trail a little bit wider for horses and carts, then wagons, and then it just got wider and deeper. Every time they worked it with a mule and pan and a shovel, it got a little deeper every time. And it's amazing that that it didn't get moved. Most of the road bed we've seen today has been moved at one time or another, but this is the original one here. There's an original section of it. That's deep.
Yeah, it is.
And they have hauled in, I don't know what this dirt really is, but locally this is called jawbone.
Oh, yeah?
I don't know why it got that name, but it has always been called jawbone. There's an area of Talbot and Harris County where they dig the dirt out, and it's called jawbone dirt. And it's just a mixture of kind of a sandy sort of white clay that packs and does not get gummy and muddy like red clay does.
Right.
And the road departments in all the counties around here have used it for decades. And that's what they haul in here and put on top of the clay to keep it from being so muddy.
I think this is just about like what's on my farm, on the bird farm. Once you get down past the black dirt, it's kind of this base.
Well, after you pass the bird farm, about 2 miles on the other side of the creek,
Yeah.
that's called Jawbone Hill. And
Oh,
that's
really?
where the county mined the jawbone.
Oh, wow. That makes sense.
Jawbone
Makes
Hill.
sense now. As you said, so many of these roads have been moved and realigned, but standing here on a road that's, you know, hasn't been paved, it's dirt, it's still wild, pretty much. It's just kind of, you know, you think about all the people that have come down this road from the Native American trail to now in a modern car. And it is so quiet out here.
It's amazing how that pine tree has adapted to the erosion.
Right?